when I got out. So I was able to kind of chill out, like having some of those people surrounding me, like Noah.
Had you been doing jujitsu for a while, like before you started over at Victory, or MMA in general, or was that kind of you getting into some of it
So
then?
Victory is like my home gym. That's where I started. I got involved in jujitsu basically right at the end of my military career. So I
Uh-huh.
got involved in a combatives tournament, and I was just like, oh yeah, we get to fight people and we get to
Yeah.
be out of the office. I'm not cleaning rifles and stuff for freaking 24/7. I actually get to do some cool stuff.
Like
So I
sick.
got involved with modern army combatives, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if you know about the military combatives, but they're a little bit like
Sure, like make map and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
kind
It's like, all
of.
right,
Yeah.
shrimp for 8 days, and then you get your level one certificate. Uh,
Yeah.
and so that
Right.
though, like back when I was in the military, I just hit the weights, really hard. So
Hmm.
I was a big dude. I was like maybe 190. I was benching like freaking like my max was 370 at the time. It was
Wow.
crazy.
Right.
And the thing was though, when I got into this combatives thing, I got involved in it and started training for it and for a tournament. And this little dude, man, this little guy, another Filipino guy actually, but he was
Oh,
like
interesting.
140, 145. And I was like I said, like 190 at the time. And he was tearing me up. He was just tearing me up. He would, I had decent wrestling because I wrestled in high school. And so I would like be able to take him down. And then he would just guillotine the shit out of me with some high level guillotines. Or even if I like locked down my chin enough, he would just be breaking my jaw.
Mm,
He's like, call me
right.
the lion tamer, like against bigger guys and everything.
It's
And
so funny.
it turns out he was a purple belt from I think Gracie Fishhawk in
Mm,
Florida, and he's a black belt now, and he's a crazy leg locker, like
mm.
really high level, but he was a purple belt back then. And
Huh.
I hadn't done any jujitsu ever. I had some wrestling, and so like from then on, I was kind of like my mindset really shifted of like all this muscle doesn't really do anything for me. It's like
Right.
great, I can lift weights, I can I could throw around some weight, and I could do whatever I need to do. But in terms of athleticism, in terms of like real world application, like I'm getting killed by this 140, 145 pound guy. So I need to
Right.
really kind of switch to training. And that kind of
Hmm.
like kicked me into gear of like right when I got
Mm.
out of the military, I
Right.
I found jujitsu right away. I sought out like where I was gonna live. I already knew I was gonna go to San Diego after I came from
Huh.
Alaska. Wanted to be in a warm, nice, sunny
Yeah.
country and
Yeah. Get the fuck
everything.
out of there.
Yeah, and then just found victory and kind of just like immediate dove in. And it
Right.
was it was really helpful for me too because when I got out, like I said, I was like that very stringent mindset. I was still looking for war, man.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and so the martial arts and jujitsu specifically helped me. It kind of helped calm me down, not only in the sense that I got to express myself in
Hmm.
those ways and get that out of my body, but also that I was getting fucked up by everybody. And it
Right.
was really kind of putting the ego in check.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was it was helping me relax, not getting fights outside of the
Uh-huh.
gyms or anything. Even though that
Uh-huh.
aggressive nature was there, it helped
Right.
relax that by saying like, "Hey, dude, you're not a big bad like dude like you think you are. You had a rifle then, and you had a squad, and you had a platoon, and you had trucks, you had all this stuff, and you were going to war. That's
Right.
not that's not the case here in the civilian world. You need to kind of keep that in check and figure that out. And so Victory and all of those people in that community really helped me like express and explore that
Uh,
in a healthy way rather than drinking myself under the table, getting into fights, blacking out, and things like that.
100%. One thing that I've found super cool about jujitsu specifically, and you see this when you see the guys like at the high, brown, purple, black, um, the chillest dudes. And part of that, I think, it's all the stuff that you just said is kind of like, your ego gets sort of humbled. You kind of realize, hey man, this can go a lot of different ways, out on the streets, and you kind of get a little bit of wisdom and maturity to it. But I also think there's an aspect of you've spent so much time in really uncomfortable positions having to think through the problem. You know what I mean? Some dude on your face, your arms like this, and you're like, oh man, brute strength is not going to get you out of this situation, And so if you kind of take that metaphor and bring it to like, road rage or something like that, some dude cuts you off, well, yelling at that person or laying on the horn, it's not really going to stop what just happened, you know, but that blood pressure kind of rising, that rage, and I think like what jujitsu does, it just kind of pounds your face into the mat about this, is that you're like, hey dude, like you getting your blood pressure up and you getting
Yeah.
all riled, that's not going to help you in this situation. And when you're a white belt, you're a blue belt, think how many times if you try just, and then
Yeah,
as you get higher and higher, it's just like, hey buddy, there's another way out of here, let's breathe,
exactly.
you
You
know
got to find another way, and that's how you evolve to the next level, right? At
right.
white belt level, I mean, specifically for myself, being a bigger guy and being like really strong willpower and just like no matter what, go. The white belt level was just go, 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 go.
Mm,
Probably so much of the blue belt level for myself too. It
yeah,
was just like
yeah.
keep going, keep trying, and that was the mindset so much in the military as well.
Hmm.
Like you just
Yeah.
keep going, you just keep doing the same thing until it works. You keep
Yeah.
hitting your head against the wall until you break the fucking wall. Like
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
stop. You just keep
No.
doing that. And in jujitsu, like you're saying,
Right.
eventually you either keep doing that and you have a ton of concussions and injuries and you're all fucked up, or you're like, oh, let me go around the wall, let me go under the wall, let me go over the wall. There's so many different ways. And so hopefully, people learn about themselves and understand like, oh, it's not all about like effort and trying
Hmm.
hard. Sometimes it's about trying a little less. Sometimes it's
Right.
about, like you said, breathing and figuring out a way around the problem instead of just straight through the problem.
And that metaphor for business too, you know, 100%. Because there's so many times, where it's like, I'll even beat myself. Am I not working long enough? Am I not working hard enough? Yeah, and you kind of spinning your wheels in a lot of ways, thinking you're going faster, but you're just sort of expending energy. And maybe what you need to do is kind of get into that lower gear, slow down, be a little bit more patient, evaluate the situation, what is the rush, and prioritize things, then kind of move forward. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And that, like, again, what you're kind of talking about, I think, is the awareness of that. Like when you're getting smashed and you're trying the same thing that isn't working, there
Mm,
needs to be that awareness of, hey, this isn't working. So I can switch to something else. And that's like what you're
right,
talking about right now, of being able
right.
to have the wherewithal and awareness to be able to be like, oh, wait, I am trying this and it's a good thing to try. It's a wonderful
Yeah,
tool to use,
right.
but maybe this isn't a nail and maybe I need to put down the hammer and grab
Uh-huh.
a different tool.
Right,
And that's what
right.
that awareness gives you is like everything opens up and it's like, oh, there's more than just nails everywhere. And I have more than just a hammer.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, dude. Well, let me introduce you. So I'll just give a kind of little intro. So I'm Jordan Ryan, and welcome to the Mind Body Mushroom, the podcast where we explore the magic of mushrooms, adaptogens, and all the ways you can naturally upgrade your health and well-being. Each week, we break down the science behind medicinal mushrooms, ancient healing wisdoms, and share some truly mind-blowing stories of transformation. Today, I'm honored to welcome Nick Badis to the show. Nick is an Army veteran, martial artist, and holistic psychotherapist with a passion for helping others uncover their true potential. After earning his master's in clinical counseling from Point Loma Nazarene University, Nick gained extensive experience working with adults facing complex psychiatric disorders, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, PTSD, and anxiety. Nick's own journey is deeply influenced by his time as an Army airborne infantryman, an experience that shaped his life in profound ways. While he is proud of his service, the challenges of reintegrating into civilian life led Nick on a transformative quest for healing and self discovery. Along the way, he embraced martial arts, meditation, breath work, and higher education, guided by the wisdom of teachers, friends, and healers who helped him to integrate his experience and grow. Today, Nick combines his expertise in trauma informed care with a holistic approach to therapy, including internal family services. He believes deeply in the concept of an unbroken, compassionate, and whole inner self, a part of us that's that different cultures and traditions refer to by many names: the Buddha nature, the Holy Spirit, the Atman, and or Pachamama. Nick's mission as a therapist is to guide his clients in connecting with this inner self, using it as a foundation for healing, balance, and growth. With his compassionate, empowering approach, Nick helps his clients identify the parts of themselves that may have held them back, allowing them to take control of their lives and move towards fulfillment. Nick, welcome to the podcast, and I'm excited to dive into your story, man.
Thanks, dude. It's great to be on here. And it's funny, like you mentioning just the title of your podcast, the
Mm,
Mind Body Mushroom podcast. A lot of what isn't in that intro is some of the elements of psychedelics that
sure.
really helped push me towards therapy and continuing to understand
Mm,
myself. I mean, that's why I'm a therapist,
no
is
way.
to have really, to understand the things that I went through and to help heal those things. And I've found that the way that you best do that is by helping others. So
Hmm.
whenever I'm helping someone figure themselves out, it's really like I'm seeing a part of myself in them, and to be able to help them deal with that helps me deal with my own things as well. And a lot of that came up through my journey with psychedelics as I was actually on my way to becoming an accountant.
No way.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about that. That sounds super interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, so like when I just got out of the military,
Uh-huh.
I was just all go, like I was saying. I was all go. 2012, I had deployed to Afghanistan for an entire year. And when I got out in
Brutal.
2013, the word was we were pulling out. That we were pulling out. We weren't going to be in Afghanistan anymore. The war was ending, and I was an infantryman. My whole
Yeah.
point of being in was to go to war, to
Yeah.
whatever we were tasked to. Like that was my job, to be on the front lines and to use those skills. So when the word started spreading that, like, hey, we're not going to deploy anymore, we're going to be a garrison unit, I was like, I don't want to be garrison. Like, I need to get out. Like, I only put up with this bullshit because it feels like
Yeah.
I'm doing something meaningful.
Right.
I'm actually doing stuff that I'm supposed to as my job. Of course, years later, some of those ideologies kind of shifted as I learned more about the reasoning for Afghanistan and things like
Mm,
that, which is a whole nother subject on its own.
right.
But
Right.
so I got out because we weren't gonna be deploying anymore. I wasn't gonna be doing my job, and I'm not
Hmm.
a garrison trooper.
Yeah.
I'm just not a
Yeah.
garrison soldier. I was there to do my job. And so when I got out, I just went to like some college counselors, and immediately it was like, hey, I'm using my GI Bill. I want to get a job that I'm going to be able to make some money with, because
Hmm.
make money, let me just follow this path, you know,
Mm,
A, B, C. You get your degree, you make some money, you start a family, you do all this stuff. That's the American dream, right?
right.
And so I started down that path, and I got all my general eds done at a community college so I could save some of my GI Bill, transferred to University of San Diego, like you and
Mm,
Noah
yeah.
did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went there for my accounting degree because all the counselors were like, business. Like if you get a degree in business, you'll be making money in no time. And I was like, okay, I
Right.
guess. Like,
Sounds nice.
it's not too hard. I need to know a little bit of math. I need
Right.
to just pay attention. And after I got out, man, I was like, I could crush school. Like
Yeah.
I just gotta listen to this teacher a little bit. I gotta study
Right.
a little bit and do some homework. Too
Right.
easy.
Right.
Too easy. So even though I wasn't a fan of the subject, I knew how to be disciplined. I knew how to
Hmm.
study. I knew how to work hard. And so it was
Right.
a breeze. Obviously, I wasn't too interested in it though. So I was
Hmm.
pulling some all-nighters, studying like that and everything. And I was super interested in psychology, always have been, in terms
Mm,
of philosophy, psychology, spirituality. Been really
mm.
interested in that. But I didn't
Mm.
want to pursue my bachelor's in psychology because you can't do anything with a bachelor's
Right.
in
Right. Where's the
psychology.
money? Yeah.
Exactly. It
Exactly.
gets you nowhere. Like you can become an assistant, or you basically need higher education for
Hmm.
the psychology route. And so I was like, okay, I need to make money. So just followed all of the, counselors' advice and all the educators' advice, which was my first mistake. And so I'm at
Interesting.
USD, and I'm starting to actually get into the classes that you need to for your major. So I'm doing
Hmm.
the regular classes for accounting, but as USD, as you're aware of, is that you need to take some specific courses because it's a Catholic institution. You
Yeah.
need to take some religious courses.
Hmm.
And so this was an opportunity for me to explore some of the things that I actually wanted to.
Right.
So one of the courses I took was world religions, and it was just multiple different religions that I got to delve into a little bit more deeply and kind of start exploring those. So I started exploring Buddhism, Hinduism, and other indigenous kind of cultures and what they were doing. And in some of my studies, I happened upon some of the indigenous cultures in South America, like Peru and other places that use ayahuasca.
Hmm.
And in their kind of spirituality and how they deal with their things, how they're talking with plant medicines, how they're healing so much of the different things that they've been going through, and even going back to some of these cultures, like African cultures, for instance, that when they come back from war, they're not allowed to go back to civilization until they've done a ceremony to release the traumas that
Wow.
they've found within in that war zone.
I didn't even know that. That's so profound. Wow, that's
Yeah, and
crazy,
and
dude.
it makes so much sense. Like when
Hmm.
you come back from something like war or battle or anything, even like maybe a traumatic argument with your spouse or with friends or anything like that, you're carrying this type of energy that needs to be released or cleansed in some way. And our Western culture, in my opinion and what I've been through, is more about suppression, right?
Yeah.
Pushing those things down and putting your best foot forward while
Yeah.
hiding all of the nitty-gritty stuff that we don't want to see or want anyone else to see.
Yeah. Or numbing that pain so that
Exactly.
you don't feel it, right?
Exactly. Especially with veterans, numbing is like
Hmm.
the way to go. And specifically even more towards men in our culture. There's
Hmm.
only a few emotions that are okay to feel. And so
Right.
that's like maybe like anger, you're a big, strong, angry man, that's okay. And that idea of maybe the fake stoicism, right? Like you just have a
Mm.
blank slate
Rock
and that's
solid.
that's
Yeah.
stoicism. But that in reality, that's not. Right?
Yeah.
Stoicism is understanding these emotions and being able to express them in a mature way without letting them
Mm.
kind of take over. But our culture today has been like, no, it's all about suppressing emotions and only carrying certain ones forward. So as I was studying some of these religions and different things, it just really kind of started piquing my interest. And I was raised Christian, but as I tried to re-explore those foundations of my religion, it just wasn't for me. Like I had so much like Christian guilt
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was
That's what I
like
was about to say.
associated with
Yeah.
that religion for me.
Uh-huh.
Like I
Uh-huh.
felt like just a bad person
Right.
because
For
some
even
of the
questioning, for even thinking outside of, the box there.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And in that kind of way, I felt like really guilty for just being human, for just
Hmm.
being like who I was. And so I tried going back to Christianity and it just wasn't for me. And in more of my years of understanding my own spirituality and religion, totally cool with Christianity,
Yeah.
Catholicism, and the way it works for other people. But for
Yeah.
me, I just had some of these kind of qualms with it that didn't feel right
Right.
for me. And so I started, like I said, getting into these other religions, practicing breath work, practicing mantra, practicing these different techniques, yoga, stretching, and a lot of these things that actually really helped me in my training, in my jujitsu, and in fighting.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, like I'm really excited to be parts of these things. Let me
Yeah.
go further with it.
Right.
And so another thing that I was doing at this time was really studying a lot of Spanish and their cultures. I was interested at the time in not only a business degree like accounting, but I was going to do like world business or business in that regard with a
Yeah.
minor in Spanish. And so I was
Right.
traveling to different Spanish speaking countries as well. So I was like, two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this culture and some of their indigenous aspects and how maybe this medicine can help me. So I decided to go to Peru specifically to try to track down a curandero or shaman. We kind of wrongly call them shamans here, when in reality they like to be called like more healers, like which is curandero. Um, because shaman has a lot of kind of like bad connotations with it, like medicine men trying to cast spells and do voodoo and things like that. But so I had that goal in mind of like, man, I feel called towards this. And now too, like after being involved in many ceremonies and studying this kind of medicine and all of these different things, it's like that's when you pursue something, when you feel that calling. Kind of like Alan Watts says, like when when you get the message, you pick up the phone, you hear the message and you put it down, like
And you put it
until you
down.
pursue it. Or even the hero's journey, right? That phone is going to keep ringing until you pick it up and go. And so I had that calling. I had it and I was like, man,
Mm.
and I'm the type to just go like 100%. Like if I have a calling or something's pulling me, I need to go towards it. And so this was happening for me. And at the same time, I was going, like I said, I was a young man fresh out of the military and I was starting to see these things that were a little different about me, that were a little off
Mm.
compared to the
Mm.
civilians that I was in college with.
Interesting. Interesting.
Like I was only like 24, maybe 25, and I
Yeah.
felt like I was this old man
Yeah.
surrounded by kids
Right.
who didn't understand the world and the reality of life. And I had this kind of mindset like of that. Like I was
Yeah.
really just angry. And like I said, I was trying to like stay out of fights, like not black out, and martial arts thankfully was helping with that.
Right.
But it was still there. That aggression was still there. Martial arts was helping keep it at bay. And so I wanted to explore this. I wanted to help myself with this. I wanted to figure that out. And so I went to Peru and I found a curandero and had an ayahuasca session, an ayahuasca experience. And that opened my eyes to so much of what was going on with me that it really started to change the direction of my journey. Like I was going to complete my business degree. I was going to follow that through, but I already knew in my mind like this I'm not going to be in accounting for very long.
Hmm.
And I really wasn't. I got my degree and I worked for a top accounting firm, PwC.
Hmm.
They're known as one of the big four.
Hmm.
And I worked for them for 6 months. And I was like,
Oh,
I got
wow.
no, I'm out. I'm out. I can't do
Yeah.
this. And that was when I went from an amateur fighter to becoming a professional fighter too.
No
I'm
way,
kind of
dude.
jumping all kinds of places here.
No, no, I love
Right?
that, dude. This story is amazing, and there's a couple areas I want to tug on, but just because you mentioned it now, what about that ayahuasca experience? Like, how did you go from, because everyone kind of knows, all right, you're going to see some things or whatever,
Mhm.
and it's going to be profound, but did you come to that realization that you wanted? I need to make a change. I need to pivot from where I'm going,
Yeah.
and the medicine kind of showed you that.
Yeah. So we've touched a little bit on what kind of really helped change my experience. And so as I was doing ayahuasca, I went with a friend of mine to Peru and we were exploring and everything and he did the ayahuasca with me and it was just me, him, the lead guide, curandero, and his apprentice. And so we went into this, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and it was going to be like all night kind of ceremony basically. And we it was kind of different than what I've experienced later during
Mm.
ceremonies. They had the brew, the
Hmm.
ayahuasca brew, and then they also had these little pieces that now I know are like the leaf,
Mm.
and you would drink those and take like a little bit of the leaf because the
Mm.
ayahuasca is two different plants, right? It's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Banisteriopsis and it's the copy vine. So you have these two components, the vine and the leaves, which are from different plants mixed together, and or the bark and the leaves that are
Right.
mixed together to be able to create the ayahuasca. And so it was really different because you'd have the brew and then they would also give you what they call chocolate because it was like mixed with chocolate.
Uh,
They would give you that, and that is what would create the MAOI inhibitor that would allow your stomach to create or to process the DMT. Very different, but so we did one just to start,
hmm.
and we're kind of just chilling there, and I'm just breathing through it. I'm practicing a little bit of my breath work and relaxing, and they told us like very, very specifically, like, hey, these are your individual journeys. So if you're having problems, that's your problem.
Mm,
If your friend's having problems, that's his problem. You
mm.
don't try to go into his journey and
Oh,
save him and
interesting.
rescue him.
Right.
And so we had this kind of instruction in mind. And so he, like my buddy, he's kind of starting to go through it. And
Shit.
he had some really big traumas in his past that were coming up for him, where some of his like one of his family members was murdered, and some of this stuff was coming up, and he wasn't ready. He
Jesus.
wasn't ready to go deep into
Right.
that and to
Right.
express that and to figure that out. And so after the one cup, and he was starting to feel that, like me and him, we kind of like a little bit of talking, and I was like, "You got this. Just breathe through it, relax." But he ended up leaving. He's like, "No, I can't do more. I'm
Oh,
done."
wow. Right.
And so I was like, "Okay, cool. You stopped at one cup, so thankfully
Yeah.
it's not good. You're like you can't come out yet."
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So he left, and he just kind of passed out in our bunk. And so I'm just there now with the two curanderos, and I'm like,
And it.
let's go, man.
Let's
I'm
go.
feeling a little tingly, but that's it. And so we do more. We do more, and we have like little breaks. Like I remember coming back from the bathroom, and he's like, "How are you doing?" And they're all speaking Spanish while
Yeah.
I'm like
Oh shit.
starting to trip, basically. And the only thing that I could kind of process is really difficult to speak Spanish while my brain is connecting in these different paths that they've never been in before.
While you're speaking alien.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember just being like más profundo. Like I want to
Mm,
have a bigger experience, more
yeah.
profound. I want to go deeper.
Yeah.
And the curandero, the main one, he's like, "Yeah, let's
Yeah. Say no
go."
more,
He's like,
fam.
"All
Hell
right,
yeah.
yeah." And so we go deep. We go deep. So I have like 4 cups, and I'm still kind of like waiting to go into it. And I remember specifically, like, so a little bit of background, like I've had a few amateur fights at this time, and like I said, I'd been in the military, I'd gotten out, but a really big part of me like still didn't think anything I'd done was enough. Like the war I had been through, it
Yeah.
wasn't enough.
Totally,
It
dude.
wasn't like the Iraq war. It wasn't like Fallujah. It wasn't like Vietnam. It was a very frustrating war for me,
Yeah.
where it was guerrilla warfare nonstop. Afghanistan, they would pop shots from freaking 1,000 meters away, where they'd maybe get close to us sometimes, or obviously there's IEDs blowing our fucking
Mhm.
trucks up and things like that, and then you never have eyes on the enemy.
Yeah.
Like, and so it was a very frustrating war that I didn't
Right.
expect. And a big part of me really wanted to like be on the front lines where
Yeah.
you're freaking taking out a fucking hatchet if you need to type of.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
that was a hard part for me to accept because a lot of
That's
people
so
didn't
interesting.
understand that.
Totally.
Like you wanted to fucking kill people, and you wanted
Right.
to fight people and like go through this. And
Right.
so there was like a shameful element of like me wanting to go through that experience as just an innate warrior. Like the warrior
Right.
side of me, the
Yep.
young man in me wanted to experience this and to fight for my country. But another part was like, well, you're shameful for wanting to
Right.
experience this.
And then there's the shame that you didn't get to do that. You didn't even get to scratch that itch. So
Yeah,
you have the shame for feeling that you wanted it, and shame for feeling like you were this close and still didn't get there, dude. It resonates
exactly.
so much with me. It
Yeah.
really
And
does.
so there was almost like survivor's guilt
Yeah.
in that,
Yeah.
where like my like one of my sergeants, he got shot while I was on leave, and I felt terrible. I was the
Yeah.
designated marksman, like, and he got taken out by a freaking sniper, you know and so he gets hit by like a Czech sniper or something. The Afghans always had like people rolling in from different countries.
Mhm.
They were the ones to worry about, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And so he got hit a couple times while I was on leave, one of our biggest firefights, and I was
Mm,
gone.
fuck.
And like those kind of moments where I was like, in my head, a lot of it was, you haven't done enough. You haven't gone
Yeah.
through enough. Like you haven't
Yeah.
suffered enough. And that was my idea of like what made you better, what made you more of a man or more of a warrior. And so this is just context for a little bit of the insight that I gained through this trip. And so that had started spilling over into me as a fighter. And
Mhm.
even though I'd won a few of my amateur fights, I had won those, dominated them really in the first round.
Mhm.
And I still like to myself was like, those weren't real. Those weren't real enough. Those weren't battles. You didn't have to push yourself. You didn't have to have this kind of grind where it was a war.
Mhm.
And so that was coming in a lot for me. And I had another fight coming up.
Mhm.
And so I still didn't even call myself like a fighter. And I still didn't even like telling people that I fought because I felt like a fake in so many ways. I didn't even talk for many years about my service because, again, I was only in 4 years.
Yeah.
I got deployed once for a year. To me, again, I was comparing myself to these other people
Yeah.
who had been through something different. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, like I haven't done enough. Like I don't even want to talk about how I'm a veteran because like I'm not, Jocko Willink or something. And so this kind of was starting to
Wow.
happen as those cups started to hit me, as the ayahuasca, as the medicine started to really take place. This was the narrative that was going in
Wow.
my head. It was a highly critical voice that I know very well that was just berating me. That was just telling me how I'm not good enough, how I haven't done enough, how the war I'd been wasn't enough, how I haven't done enough as a fighter, and it just kept going. And I remember as the curanderos were chanting and starting to play the various instruments that they had, there was this one specific one that like sounded like lightning and thunder that they started playing, and another like didgeridoo type of instrument. So there's these sounds going on, and it kind of started shaking me at my core. I'm having this argument with myself, literally telling myself like I'm not
Wow.
good enough and all of these things that I need to do. And remember even like comparing myself to Jocko in a lot of ways because he
Mhm.
trains at Victory.
Trains there, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
so I had met him and I was like, man, like that's who I want to be
That's it.
like.
Right.
And
Right.
like I remember too when I got out of the service and during the service, man, I had this type of like stare where I would just look through people's freaking souls. And
Mhm.
that's how Jocko looked like all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh man, like that's what I want. What do I got to go through to be like him? And I
Right.
remember as I'm going through this trip, like comparing myself and berating myself, how like I hadn't been through enough, and how I'm not like Jocko, and how I need to get to that level. And so I'm just like tearing into myself, man, like highly, highly critical. And as they're playing this music and everything, all of a sudden I hear this voice. And so the voice that I'm talking with, I'm very familiar with. That's already my
That's you.
inner narrative.
Right. Right.
And it's masculine. It's a masculine voice. It's a man's voice. It's my voice in a lot of different
Hmm.
ways. And so it's, I'm arguing with this, and then another voice comes in, and it's a voice I'd never heard before,
Mm.
and it was feminine. I
Mm.
don't have a female voice inside of me, so it was very distinct.
Wow. Yeah.
And like I was like, whoa, what is that? And it just tells me, it just starts easing me, and it tells me it's okay. It's okay. You've done enough. You're fine. You've done so much. You're gonna do more. You're okay. And it just really starts calming me down and affirming me in a lot of ways. And it's just this gentle female voice. And this was kind of the beginning of me getting in touch with the divine feminine, with me being able to understand that not everything is hard, that we as men can also have the soft side. And in fact, that's balance. That's the point of being a whole human, of integrating the masculine and the feminine. And so this voice starts talking to me and calming me down, and it's like I said, very distinctly feminine. And so from there, that's when like all the hallucinations and waves of just these different things
Mm.
start coming over me. As I relax and instead of fighting all of this, I let go into this voice. And after this voice kind of comes up, I see this very particular kind of this snake like slither up to me and come up to me. And it's like this horned, desert tan and brown kind of viper looking snake.
Yeah.
Comes up and it just kind of like comes up right up to me. And I'm just like, what's going on? and then it slithers back and it just starts coiling into itself. And as I'm just kind of watching this, all kinds of like hundreds of other snakes, thousands of other snakes start coming into
Whoa.
that and start there's this term for this when like hundreds or thousands of snakes start to kind of knot into one another. And so they start
Really?
coiling into each other, and just like hundreds of thousands of snakes start
Whoa,
coiling into
dude.
themselves, and they create this beautiful tree of life as they kind of coiled into that. And so that kind of was the opening of my feminine energy, of kind of
Mhm.
understanding and opening up kind of that root chakra,
Mm,
which is basically the how Kundalini energy is explained through the snake, the
right.
snake serpentine of going upwards and unleashing all of these different chakras.
Mm.
And so after I get that vision, I just start purging and purging and
Oh
purging.
shit.
And that
Right.
was kind of the start of it, of me arguing with myself and berating myself of not being good enough, and not having these experiences that other warriors have had, and all of
Yeah.
that turned into compassion for myself, and how it's okay to continue to seek these things, but not to berate myself for the experiences that I hadn't had yet. And
Wow.
so that really opened up myself to the feminine and compassion and understanding, and the journey of that versus just the constant push, which was driven for me by the criticism of not being good enough, of needing to be better, needing to do more, which is still very valuable,
Yeah.
absolutely. But that in
Right.
combination with
Yeah.
compassion and understanding is what really makes you move forward, or at least makes me move forward, because eventually the critic just gets in the way. Like as a
Yeah.
kid, you have
Yeah.
exponential growth. As an
Right. Right.
adult, there are things that you can't get past. So you need to
Right.
be able to have some patience with yourself, have some
Yeah.
compassion for yourself.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what this journey really opened up for me. After that, I just kind of kept going. I was like, I want more.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
ego wasn't gone by any means,
Right.
but I was
Right.
like, what was that insight? I need more of those insights. And so kept drinking more ayahuasca, but I wasn't getting anything out of it. I was getting like
Wow.
some calm visions and some other
Right.
cool stuff, like some greens and forest and things like that. But that was the big takeaway
That
from
was the
that
message.
experience. Yeah,
And what you said earlier, I don't know if we had hit record yet, but yeah, that Alan Watts quote that when the universe is calling and you pick up the phone, like after you get the message, you put
yeah,
it back down. Like there's you
yeah,
got the message, you got the message. Dude, that resonates so much with me because I still feel that way. I feel that way. Absolutely. I did 4 years. I got medically separated. I had a back injury. I came in to the SEAL program. I was in buds for 3 weeks. I, didn't make it through. I went to a ship. I eventually crawled my ass out of there. Went to the recon program, became a medic. But still, and then I didn't do enough. I didn't go to war.
yeah,
I didn't, I failed. I'm broken. And all of these things. I didn't get to achieve all of the things that I had set out for myself, and that feeling of like not being good enough or not doing enough. On one hand, it like fuels the motivation that like,
yeah,
hey, you don't rest on your laurels because what fucking laurels do you have to rest on, dude? Like you got to go make some laurels before you start resting. But to your other point, that you kind of can create these artificial limits by telling yourself you're not that hot, dude. You're not hot shit. Like, you're not as bad as you think you are. You didn't do as much as you think you're, and so you're not as good of an entrepreneur. You're not as good of all of these things. That on one hand, it's like it should, in some case, propel you to be better, but there's a point of diminishing returns where you are just now unnecessarily beating yourself up. And
yeah,
in some ways, it's like the parent that is telling their kid, "Ah, yeah, that's stupid. That's a stupid dream. You're not going to be able to do that. You're not gonna,
exactly.
do you think that that kid's going to, in spite and become the best thing ever? Maybe, or maybe they're going to have issues because you took away all their confidence by putting these limits that they may not have otherwise had. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, at a certain point that becomes limiting. Like maybe as a kid or something, right? Like with coaches and everything, like push harder. Like you need to
right?
discover you need to discover that you can push past
Yeah.
your limits in certain ways. And as a
Right.
young man, it's helpful. It's helpful to be pushed in that way and to be able to learn that skill of
Mhm.
like, oh, stop being a bitch, don't be a pussy,
Right.
push
Right.
harder. Okay, yeah. But then once you've learned that,
Hmm.
okay, like to your point, it's time to learn some other skills and to use
Hmm.
that when it's helpful and to use other things when it's not. Because like you said, it can be very limiting, maybe not as a kid, because you can push past a
Yeah.
lot of things and you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
just will your way through some stuff.
Right. Right.
But as you get to adulthood and these other complex problems, there are some
Uh-huh.
things that you can't just will yourself through.
Right.
And so that's when we need to recognize that and thank the critical part of ourselves. Hey, thanks. I understand that you want to make me better and you want me to push. I'll do that. But can we also use some other skills besides
Yeah.
just pushing?
Yeah. Do we need to go through this wall like this time? I don't know if you're recording
Yeah.
it, or is it a time to go over? Is it a time and being able to like take that space, breathe a little bit, evaluate your situation because maybe just the method that you are attempting over and over and over again isn't the best method for going. And I think this message is super important for guys in the military, guys getting out of the military, just young men, like anyone really. But I think that because of that, our society that kind of suppresses that divine feminine aspect of manhood, and then on the flip side, it's toxic masculinity if you're too. So it's like, what are you supposed to do? Like that people are adrift, they don't really know, and so hearing it from guys like veterans, MMA fighters, people that are that have done enough, and a lot of people look up to for inspiration. I want to be like that guy. I'm sure that there are plenty of people at Victory that see you training, see you, and they're like, dude, that dude's a badass. Like he inspired me to join the military. He inspired me to, go get my black belt, whatever the case is. Yeah, and just being able to also offer that, I'm not just this big, strong army guy.
Yeah.
It's like there's a soft side to it, and being that like complete person is what's going to make you successful in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, that balance, really.
Balance.
And
Do
it's
you,
so
now,
funny.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I
It's
want
so
I want
funny
you
too,
to.
like
Yeah.
in thinking about some of those visions and stuff now, right? It's like seeing Jocko now too.
Yeah.
He's softened so much
That's so
in
funny.
such
Yeah.
like a beautiful way. Like
Right.
seeing him with Reina or on the mats with some of these guys and stuff now, because back then when I had first met him, like I
Mm,
said 10 years ago or so, he wasn't as much in the limelight as he is now.
hmm.
And I think being around people and constantly telling his story, like, and maybe
Mm,
this is just my perspective, but I've seen that he's kind of softened a little bit, and not in a
yeah.
way where it's
No,
like
no.
his jujitsu isn't any good or anything like that.
Right, right.
Rather, he's like much more personable and maybe more in touch with that
Yeah,
divine
interesting.
feminine. And that's almost
Right.
made it okay for me and others, like to your point, in the
Yeah,
community to be like, hey, it's okay
it's
to
okay.
be a badass and to be
Yeah.
compassionate and to be able to be soft. It's okay to be like and really. It's not
Yeah.
an either or, but it's
Yes.
and.
Yes, yes. That's where, the pushback from society about toxic masculinity, it's saying, don't be that. You need it, but it's kind of a both and. It really is. I think
Yeah.
that and component. Now, can you talk a little bit about, your transition then into therapy and how you kind of brought those insights and maybe I saw on your bio the family your IFS family specialist. I might have gotten that a little
Yeah.
wrong, but
So
go ahead.
so I actually work with individuals mostly.
Injury.
So IFS, it stands for internal family systems.
Gotcha. Sorry.
So we basically we have a family system, obviously, and there's an ecology to it, right? It's its
Mm,
own ecosystem. So if your mom influences you, your influences from your mom are going to affect your brother or your dad.
mm,
It all
hmm.
affects itself in a lot of different ways. And so that ecosystem that is outside of us, and there's tons of ecosystems, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's your gym or it's your work ecosystem or it's your family, all these different ecosystems kind of don't exist on their own, but they affect one another. And
Right.
so our internal ecosystem, we have a very similar kind of system. We were talking about, for instance, a big part of ourselves, the critic. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one part of ourselves
100%.
that talks to us and tells us a certain perspective, right? And so internal
Right.
family systems is getting to know these multiple parts of ourselves. So
Mm.
I have maybe the critic, right? I also have maybe a cheerleader part who's like, ah, you can do it, you got it, go, go, go. And the critic's like, ah,
Right.
man, you suck. You need to get off the couch, stop being a fucking lazy fat ass. You got to work. And then
Hmm.
I have these other parts, like my therapist hat, who's gonna be
Mm.
like, oh, let's figure this out. Let's talk about this. Let's see where this is coming from. What part is he in right now? Different things like
Mm.
that. And so what internal family systems does is helps separate from those parts because
Mm.
we're not those parts. Those are
Yeah.
mostly a product of us trying to protect ourselves in different ways.
Mm.
So we
Mm.
separate from these, whether through breath work or meditation or just mindfulness of getting in touch with our real self, which is the divine self. We separate from these parts and we get to know them a little bit better. So, since we're already on the subject of the critic,
Yeah.
instead of just telling the critic like shut the fuck up man, you're
Right.
just ruining my vibe, making me feel like shit,
Right.
right?
Right.
Instead of that, which is what we do typically, we try to suppress these parts of
Mm.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It became more of an understanding of that. And so
Mm.
my the first work I did in delving into IFS was talking with the critic. And basically you have to be in this perspective of what IFS calls the self with a capital S. And that is the divine nature of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we're able to be compassionate towards people, or we're able to be curious, or we're able to be confident in these different
Mm.
kind of descriptions. And that's what we have to, that's kind of what I do is I facilitate making sure my client is in that energy and is in that state while talking to the different parts of themselves.
Huh.
So while I kind of got into the self, I was curious about the critic, and I was able to say like, hey man, like what do you do? And he's like, well, I make sure you don't fail. So my
Mm.
critic is telling me like I make sure you're not lazy and that you do the
Mm.
things you need to do and you push yourself. And another kind of line of those questions, or somewhere along the lines of those questions, as you get more rapport with these parts of yourselves, because sometimes we're literally fighting with these parts of ourselves all the time. But once this part understands, like you're not trying to get rid of it, it's willing to talk
Yeah.
to you.
Oh,
All right. So I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to make
interesting.
you disappear. I'm not trying to
Right.
change your job. But like, why do you do this? And he's like, well, again, if I don't do this, if I don't call you lazy when you're sitting on the couch, or if I don't say you're weak, then you won't
Mm-hmm.
go lift, or you
Yeah.
won't get off the couch, or you won't do these things. That's what the critic is kind of afraid of, that I won't
Right.
do the things necessary to elevate and to grow. And so I'm talking to this part of myself and kind of telling it like, oh, that makes sense. Like, okay, thanks. Thanks for pushing me. And then another interesting thing that you get into with internal family systems is like, okay, when did you start doing this? And so the
Mm.
critic, it started doing this when I was like a really young kid, right? That's when it learned the
Right.
skill. And
Right.
that skill propelled me in a lot of ways, right? Like in wrestling and football and all these sports, I was able to push past physical limits. I remember a mantra from when I was a kid being like pain is weakness living the body, like an old
Yeah. Yeah.
quote,
Me too.
right?
Too. I remember
I'm
that
a
too.
freaking
Yeah.
kid, and
Yeah.
I'm going through pain, like in a lift or something. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. It's just
Yeah.
that's just weakness leaving my body, and that was my mindset through the
Yeah.
military. That was my
Yeah.
mindset once I got into fighting, and so this was the critic, and it didn't know that some of this stuff was actually like hurting me as well.
Mm.
And so these parts they get trapped in time.
Mm.
This part of myself, this critic,
That's really
thought I was
interesting.
still a little kid.
Right. Right.
And so through this process, this therapeutic process, we also help first we understand that part of ourselves and we figure it out like there's maybe even an image associated with this part of ourselves, right? Maybe it's in a certain part of our bodies, like my critic is like usually in my shoulders and neck, that kind of
Really?
tenseness. Yeah, and we get these anchors for this part. And so you know which part you're talking about. And so I'm talking with this part and I get to see it and everything. And again, its fear is that if it doesn't do its job, then I'm just going to
Yeah.
become a total loser and lazy and just not do anything. And and so I'm like, okay, well, what if you didn't have to do your job? What if
Mhm.
I was able
Was.
to just, train and, didn't need you to berate me to go to my limits and to push myself?
Hmm.
And the critic was like, oh, well, then I'd love to just cheer for you. And I'm like, what? Okay, so it wants to just do the complete opposite of what it is doing,
uh,
but it feels the need to do that because that's what it learned as a kid, that it needs to do that because that's what
mm-hmm.
coaches did for me. That's
Yeah.
what, like, my
Your
dad would do for
parents,
me.
yeah.
That's what parents do, right?
Sure.
That's how they kind of facilitate this learning process of push yourself, go beyond your
Hmm.
limits, a lot of
Hmm.
times.
Right.
So this process, like, it opened up this idea of like, oh, the critic is trying to help me. And so I'm able to be compassionate towards it. And the
Mm.
more I'm able to have that kind of perspective, the more it
Mm.
actually relaxes.
Yeah, it starts turning into that cheerleader a little bit more.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
So that's what IFS kind
Wow.
of is
That's so
listening
cool.
to these parts of ourselves instead of suppressing them and
Right.
helping update them. It's like, hey, I'm actually 34 years old now. No,
Yeah.
I'm not 6 years old. You don't need to tell me that pain is weakness leaving the body. Like
Right.
I got it, man. Like thank
Right.
you,
Right.
but you can chill out. And then it does. It's like again that Alan Watts message. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I got the message. We can hang up the phone now. And it quiets. Like once you hear it, like for example, like anxiety's trying to tell you something. Like maybe there's a test you haven't studied for, or maybe there's a job you haven't prepared for, or something like that. If you keep ignoring that, it's going to keep yelling at you, you need to prepare for this. So you get the message, we acknowledge it, we understand it, and we do something about it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I do is helping people listen
Mm.
to these different parts of themselves through a curious, compassionate self instead of like, well, why does it want me to do that? Or that's stupid. I don't want to do that. Right? That's just another part. And so there's tons of layers of these parts of our personalities that we have to get through and better understand to be able to be in that place of divine feminine, divine masculine, which actually has all the answers. And so that's the great thing
Totally.
about my job, though, is I'm
Huh.
not trying to provide answers for my clients. I'm trying to get them to their ultimate self, which has all the answers already.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's huge. I think that's so cool. But one of the pieces that resonated a lot with me was sort of updating like the time frame that it gets stuck in, because you're right, man. Like so, after having medically separated,
Mhm.
I'm still on one hand holding on to a piece of this identity that I had, being a badass in the military, and like, oh, well, I got to still, kind of pursue this and, that level of excellence because that's
Yeah,
who I am, right? Um, but I'm over in the gym and like I'm not lifting as much as I was. I'm not doing these things the way that I used to. And so you start whipping yourself into compliance to freaking like just do it, just quit being a bitch and shut up. And then you kind of re-injure something or you tweak this or
yeah,
whatever. And now you're limping out of the gym. And that the critic, which was telling you that you needed to do this because you were going to be weak and you were going to be a loser and you're going to be broken. Well, now you're limping out of the gym like a weak, broken loser, right?
yeah,
So and it's because that's not the message that you needed to hear right then. You needed to hear you're like, hey, you want to be 75 and playing with your grandkids. You want to go surfing, at 50 when a big swell comes in.
yeah.
So what? Well, like let's switch our mindset to that goal and then be a champion about the things that we're doing good, not bashing that we're not a fucking Navy SEAL right now. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Hmm.
the really cool part about some of this work is it becomes like very psychedelic. It's
Huh.
pretty crazy. Like you start
Yeah, that's
getting in touch with
wild.
these parts. And I've had clients where the parts are like they look like puppets, or parts
Oh,
where they
really?
just look like versions of themselves, or
Yeah.
parts where they look like elements, right? To everyone it's a
Is
little
this
bit
like
different.
happening in their head, or it's kind of
Yeah.
like a through your eyes closed, kind of like
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah.
oh,
Typically we're in a
interesting.
meditative state.
Yeah, meditative state.
And I'm having them, like, the first part of this is to describe where it is in your body, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it
That's really
has to say.
interesting.
That's us getting to know this part.
Yeah.
And it gets really like psychedelic-esque in that
Yeah.
way.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, and when we update that part, something really cool happens is usually we'll tell it like I'm like helping my clients like tell them some of the cool shit you've done like since you were
Huh.
freaking 6 years old. You know, let's let it know about how you've graduated
Wow.
from high school and how you've graduated from college and how you've accomplished these things and how you've gotten your purple belt or whatever and how you've become a badass in a lot of these ways. Show this part some of that. And typically the part's like, whoa, you've done some cool stuff. Like, oh, you're not a little kid who hasn't done a bunch of these things. I could
Right.
totally lighten up. I could totally relax because they're stuck protecting that little 6 year old who they think you still are. And it just changes the entire game a lot of time, just the update. But then
Dude.
typically after that, then we typically have to help the 6 year old who's been protected this whole time by the critic or whoever else. And then so we get permission from the protector to
Mm.
go down to this other part that it's been protecting. And then we
Yeah.
help unburden or release the trauma that had happened at that time where the critic needed to do this. Yeah.
Wow, dude, that's incredible. I feel like I just freaking went through one of your sessions, bro. You're pulling up some shit. No, that's freaking awesome. I kind of want to transition. We'll
Done.
wrap up here pretty soon, but what I just wanted to transition a little bit into this stem cell clinic
Yeah.
fundraiser there that you're going. You want to tell everyone about this and kind of what
Yeah.
what the deal is?
If anything, too, this kind of transitions well into that. Uh,
Cool.
because with the critic, right, the big mindset, like the biggest part of me was in essence the critic and pushing, pushing,
Yeah.
pushing,
Yeah.
pushing, do
Same.
more.
Same.
And that's kind of where my journey started to change is is I started getting in touch with the feminine, the compassion, the relaxation, the letting things happen. And as that started to happen, my body was starting to break down anyways. Like so as I was fighting, as I was getting out of competition or out of like uh the scene of college and all that, like I dove into that so hard and I had so many injuries from the military prior, but I was just ignoring them. I just
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter. Again, push, push,
Yeah.
push. Like these opportunities only come up so often. And that's really now I know too, like in especially in the fight world, you kind of have to like play the game a little bit. You
Mm.
gotta like make sure you're at peak performance and
Hmm.
maybe not take that fight and to take this one and things like that. But in
Interesting.
our
Right.
mindset, it's like, no, give me the hardest one, give me the most
Yeah.
fucked up one, give me the battle, give me the
Right.
war. Like
Right.
that's what I want. I got something to prove, even though we have nothing to freaking prove. And so that's what was going on. Like during my training and everything, neck's jacked up, back's jacked up, elbow, knees, like everything super messed up. And I'm just ignoring it. I'm just going anyways because that's how I knew how to handle things.
Yeah.
That's that's like in so many respects, that's one of the kind of ideas of the perfect soldier that I had in my mind. You
Yeah.
just walk through
Right.
shit. It doesn't matter
Right.
what's going on with your body, whatever, it'll heal.
Yeah.
Some things don't heal, right?
Yeah. Some pain isn't just weakness leaving the body.
Exactly. And that's a major difference that you kind of need the feminine to be able to realize that you need to listen to your body
Yeah.
sometimes.
Right.
You need
Right.
like pain is a really great reminder and prompt of like, hey, slow down, you're gonna break.
Yeah.
Or some of these things are getting to a point they shouldn't be. But I
Hmm.
had grown up with that idea of like, no, pain is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So
100%, dude.
so about like during COVID, uh, I had just had like one of my last fights, and it just my body was just
Oof.
destroyed, and I knew kind of from there I was like, man, I can't compete like I used to with everything that I have going on now. And the stop of COVID actually of the gyms closing down and all that like forced me to stop. And one really weird thing that happens when you stop is everything kind of settles. It's like a race car, right? It can't be
Yeah.
stopped that long. Because if
Mm.
it is, it's going to break down. Everything that's
Sure.
wrong with it comes to fruition, it comes to the surface. And so when
Mm.
I stopped because of COVID, my injuries just exacerbated. Everything all of a sudden like came to the surface. I
So
needed I
interesting.
needed knee surgery, I needed an elbow surgery. All of a sudden my neck and back started flaring up really badly and I didn't know what to do. You know, I had the VA system, I had acupuncture, I had physical therapy more times than I could count. You know, I'm a freaking expert in band work now,
Are we the
and like
same person, Nick? This is incredible.
and it just wasn't working for me, all these things. And like I'm a physical guy. Like, and
Yeah,
I'm not one of those guys who doesn't do the exercises, you know,
right.
listen to my doctors, I do the things
Right.
that need to be done. I'm motivated, I want to be healthy.
Yeah.
And so my training had to like take a cut. I had to stop
Mm,
because I was just getting hurt all
yeah.
the time. And
Yep.
not even from anything, from just
Nope.
like rolling. I'd just
Yep.
roll a little bit and I'd be like, dude, I can't do anything for a week now just from having some flow rolls. And so this was going on for the past like 4 or 5 years now. And
Mm.
I went through another stint of like physical therapy and all this stuff, and finally got some MRIs for like the doctors at the VA were like, nah, you just do this
Yeah.
PT, nah, just do
Right.
acupuncture, nah, just do this, whatever, right? Yeah.
You tried PT. Have you tried PT?
Yeah, like, dude, I've got the exercises memorized.
I am
Like,
PT.
yeah. Basically an honorary PT
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
juncture. And so finally got some MRIs last year.
Mm.
And they're like, "Oh shit, you should stop doing chiropractic work right now." They're like,
Oh,
they might give you a spinal injury, like
no
'cause
shit.
that's how like narrow the
Right.
spinal canal is now
Oh, wow.
because of the disc bulges in my
Yep.
neck and my lumbar spine. So I have 3 disc bulges in my cervical spine and 3 disc bulges in my lumbar spine. 2 of the bulges in my neck and 2 of the bulges in my lumbar spine are pretty dramatic to the point where they're pressing on so many of the nerves
Mm.
that, I'm getting what's called radiculopathy, or the
Hmm.
the tingling and numbness down different areas of my body, whether it's my left arm, right arm, or right leg, typically. And so that's happening. And the VA basically proposed to me like, hey, yeah, you're managing your symptoms pretty well. You're still working. You're not crying like a little bitch about it.
Hmm.
So you're good.
You're good,
So
right?
you're fine. In a few years, let's give you
We'll mail it.
surgery.
Yeah, yeah. We'll mail you meds until we can give you
Exactly.
surgery
Yeah.
in a
So
few
they got me
years.
on multiple pain meds and like, multiple like anti-anxiety and
Hmm.
I don't take any of them. Like,
Hmm.
I'm a therapist. Like, I know what I can do for myself with mental health and for exercise and things like that and pain management
Hmm.
to be able to still work and see clients and talk and do what I need to do without
Right.
becoming addicted to some of these substances.
Right.
So those are the options the VA presented to me. And they
Hmm.
told me, they're like, you need to stop surfing. You need to
Hmm.
stop doing jujitsu. You need to stop lifting weights. You need to stop doing all this stuff. And I'm like, that's what keeps me sane.
That's the
That's
only
what
reason I'm here sitting here talking to you.
exactly.
You
That's
know?
literally what kept me away from
Yeah.
like going to jail or ruining
Yeah.
my life after the
Or
military.
suck start at 45, man. I
E-
mean,
Exactly. So that's what stopped me from all that stuff. And I was like, I get what you guys are saying. I
yeah.
understand, but there's got to be ways to do something else where I can continue the quality of my life. Because
Yeah.
these are the things I love. These are the things I
Yeah.
live for. These are the things I make money for so that I can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can go do this, right?
Yeah. So now you want me to just work?
Yeah.
It sounds terrible. So I was drilling at one of the 6 a.m. classes at Victory MMA. Shout out to Craig Baker, one of my coaches right now. He's just a beast, man. But I was training, just doing drills, and I was kind of down on myself that day because I was like, man, I can't really do much. I like, luckily there's amazing people in that class who are willing to just drill and not beat the shit out of me. Where it's like, great, now I'm screwed for a month, 2 months, or whatever it is. And I was just kind of shooting the shit with one of the guys there, Jeff Bramstead. He's the owner of Skydive, and he's a former
Mm.
Navy SEAL. And he put me on. He told me about this program. He's like, "Hey man, have you ever looked into stem cell therapy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did, but it's expensive. It's so
Mhm.
expensive." I was like, "So I kind of like I'm just gonna save up money and try to get that done down the line."
Yeah.
And he was talking to me, and he's like, well, there's this foundation, this nonprofit that works with veterans. I'll put you in touch with them and you can just kind of see if it's for you or not. And so I get in touch with them, and it turns out that they put on fundraising type of help, give you a website and all that stuff. Um, and and so I got on with them, and they're like, yeah, let's get you in this fundraiser. You and multiple other vets are trying to get these procedures so you don't have to get surgery.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that was kind of a sign for me of like, stop putting it off,
Yeah.
do it. And this kind of idea of asking for help and talking about my injuries and things, it was very uncomfortable. It still is, right?
Hmm.
These
Hmm.
ideas again behind the masculine of basically being just this masculine guy who can't be hurt, who can't be damaged, who is never weak. And this idea of talking about injuries and stuff, to me, it's an immediate trigger of like there's weakness. Like in a fight, for instance, if you get
You go
injured or
for the
you get
weakness.
hurt, you don't
Right.
show it.
Yeah,
You
right,
don't
right,
show the opponent that
right.
your leg is hurting or
Yeah.
that you got rocked. You put on that stoic face and you
Mhm.
keep moving forward. And so a big part of this journey for me has been able to, or has been being able to kind of talk about these things that I'm really going through, instead of telling my clients how they can get through theirs and then again suppressing my own, and then asking for support in this way, whether it's talking to people like you or
Yeah.
throwing on this fundraiser that is for
Yeah.
me and for other veterans.
Right.
And so that's what I did with Miracle Hope Foundation, this nonprofit that literally gets in touch with veterans and helps them raise funds to get stem cell therapy so it can happen faster rather than later. Because if I were going to do this in the timeline of me just kind of making money and
Mm.
slowly putting money away, maybe I
Uh,
get this procedure in 3 years, 4 or 5 years or something.
right,
That's like
right.
5 years of not doing the shit that I love
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just being like
exactly.
sad and pissed off all the time.
Right, right.
Because
And potentially the conditions getting worse too over that time period as well, you
most
know?
likely, most likely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I got in touch with these guys, and basically, it turns out, that they kind of just give you a website. It's like, oh,
Uh-huh.
great, yeah,
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah, there you go.
And so it kind of became more about talking to your network and
Yeah,
then creating something for yourself. And so I've had an
interesting.
amazing community who was behind me right away. Before I even put on this event, like people donated to my
Oh,
fundraiser right
it's
away. And
awesome.
it was like this affirmation of, again, like, people do care. Like it is
Yeah,
okay to talk about the things that are going wrong.
right.
It is okay to ask for help and to be supported in this way. And it was a really touching moment, while at the same time like a very anxious kind of moment of like, what if no one shows up for me?
Mm.
What if no one does care? Because everyone's got their own stuff going on, right?
Yeah, of course,
The
dude.
thing is though, is like if we all helped each other,
Yeah,
it would be just this amazing thing where everyone gets their needs met instead of
yeah.
all of us just trying to work individually.
I think they call that something, a community. A community.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a tribe.
It's
It takes
true,
a
man.
village, it takes a tribe, it takes a community to build these things.
Yeah.
And so with Bram kind of hooking me up with the Miracle Hope Foundation, I got back into it and decided like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And so I'm putting on a fundraiser event where Dean Lister is gonna do a seminar. So Dean,
Sick.
I'm sure you know about Dean.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Why would
That's
you ignore
awesome.
50% of the body, leg lock master, right? Longtime jiu-jitsu practitioner, ADCC champion, all these wonderful accolades. And he, is one of my coaches, and he told me, he's like, "Yeah, dude, I'll help you. I'll throw a seminar for this." It's just amazing.
That's amazing.
And we're literally throwing on the seminar for $50. And Dean's seminars usually cost at least 150, right? And so it's going to be this seminar at the Harley Davidson San Diego Center, which is on Marina Boulevard, right by the Costco. They have a huge facility, and
Sick.
they throw things like this all the time. And then we're going to have people like yourself with coffee there. We're going to have, free waters. We're going to have your boy for tacos. We're going to have some coconuts. We're going to have,
Yes.
other people we're going to have CPI, which is the stem cell facility that I'm going through. They're going to be
Cool.
talking about stem cells and educating people on what this can do potentially for not only me but for other people with certain
Mm-hmm.
injuries, the costs,
Huge,
things
dude.
like that. I'm having the chiropractor I used to work with, who's a Marine veteran. He's going to be coming and giving people like adjustments and posture
Sweet.
tests. So this is really for the community to be able to link up together and really be able to talk about and educate themselves on different things that might
Hmm.
be helpful for them while learning some amazing jujitsu from one of the greats for really cheap. And all
Yeah.
that money goes to veterans who are seeking stem cell therapy. And you get to write whatever you buy off because it's through
Right.
a nonprofit.
Wow, dude. That's gonna be such a sick event. Like we talked about it on the phone before we were scheduling, today's thing, and I was like stoked about it, but kind of I don't know, after a conversation and kind of walking through and you give it, dude, that is gonna be an incredible clinic opportunity. Like just alone for the opportunity to go train with Dean Lister, learn something like that, but also gonna feel good that the way that you're spending your weekend, the way that you're spending your money is going to help veterans. Like I think that really, yeah, you'd be kind of stupid not to. If you're into this at all, this would be absolutely an event to make it to. And I'm so stoked that I get to support you in any way, dude, and be there secretly.
Yeah, yeah, I really appreciate it, man. And so it's going to be free open mat from
Sick.
10 to 11, or sorry, 11 to 12. It's free open mat, and then
What was
12.
the date again? Sorry,
Yeah,
the,
no problem. January 4th, Saturday, January 4th. So right after New Year's, right? Great opportunity for people to come in right after New Year's and learn some new things and to focus on like, hey, I'm gonna learn some new drills or some new leg locks or whatever it is and kind of up their jujitsu game and really kind of start the year off right, like in that
right,
way. So
right.
January 4th, Saturday at the San Diego Harley Davidson Center on Marina Boulevard. And really like open mat from 11 to 12. 12 to 2 is the seminar. So 2 hour seminar, 50
Come
bucks.
on, dude. Are you kidding
Um,
me?
and then open mat again from 2 to 4. So,
Sick.
and even if you don't want to buy a ticket for the seminar, you can come to open mat, right? We're just going to clear out the mat so people can come back in who paid for the seminar. You can still come and just show up. So the
Yeah.
biggest thing now is just like getting the word out so people know
Right.
about it. Like honestly.
Totally. Totally. That's amazing, dude. Well, send me all of the info. I'll put it in like my email newsletter. I'll blast it on my socials. I don't have like a ton of reach, but I think it takes a community, man. A little bit here, a little bit
Exactly.
there. Like it's you tell two people, they tell two people, and before you know it, all of a sudden there's like thousands of people that you can get your message. So
Yeah, really appreciate that, man. And the whole thing about this, right, is avoiding surgery when it's
totally,
not necessary.
totally.
Like basically I would need either like a freaking
Probably
fusion
fusion. Yeah.
for multiple vertebrae. So I'm just gonna not be able to move my
Yeah.
neck and eventually just jujitsu goes out the window anyways,
Yeah.
and so does
Right.
surfing and stuff.
Yeah.
And that would be either for my neck and my lumbar spine, or it would be complete disc replacements, right? And so these are surgeries that they're good surgeries. Don't get me wrong, like, but these are supposed to be last resort
Yeah.
surgeries. I'm
Right. Right.
34 years old. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like, yeah, maybe it'll get rid of the pain, but if my functionality gets, is out the window, what's the point?
Right.
What's the point?
Right. No, totally. And I think that is, we look at surgery because it should be a last ditch option, but people kind of they do this thing where they think if I get the surgery on the other side of it, everything will be good. And that is you're kind of rolling the dice, especially with neck and back and stuff. Like, yes, it can have really good outcomes and whatever, but a lot of outcomes, it just maybe marginally improves your quality of life. It's kind of like SSRIs in some ways. It's like if an SSRI will keep you from committing suicide, take an SSRI, dude. Like, absolutely. But if it's not going to drastically move where you feel, it's just going to be there as like an absolute lifeline, and it may not even help you at all, or whatever the case is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's my hopes in this.
Yeah, that's
I'll be able
awesome.
to really actually heal instead
Good.
of just like you're saying, kind of covering up the symptoms.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Instead of
100%,
just
dude.
putting a band-aid on something and then dealing with it down the line anyways. Trying to deal with it now.
Right.
And with this amazing freaking technology out there nowadays where I'm literally trying to regrow the discs in my
Yeah,
vertebrae. It's crazy, man. The more research I've done on this, the more
yeah,
hopeful I am
that's
to be
awesome,
on the other
dude.
side of this. And with support like you and from everyone else in the community, I'm almost there. There's been a
That's
donor
amazing.
there's been a donor who is matching every dollar given to this foundation through the end of December. So some like a few veterans have already made their mark because of this donor. Like
That's awesome.
so I'm so close as well. I think I need like 5K left and I'm there. And a big part of this too, at this point, since there's only like 5 or 6K left for the donations that I need to, I really just want to throw on a good event at this point.
Dude,
Like I just want
totally.
the community to feel like they're getting something out of supporting me as well now.
Right,
Like that's what it really has become about. Like fuck it, if I have to, I'll put the rest on a fucking credit card and deal with it
right,
myself. That's okay. But I
right.
really want the people who have already supported me in this to be able to have a good time, to get
Yeah.
some knowledge, to get some understanding and to be able to start their new year off right too.
Right, right. No, I think you'll be planting the seed for a lot of veterans too, or just people in general, but who might want to explore stem cell and that stuff going in the future is maybe, like myself, like I've been in the same boat, dude, where I'm like, stem cell would be great. I've looked into it a little bit. Basically, what I've looked into is it's not really an option, like a realistic option for me right now. So I will look at other shit in the meantime. But by doing this, you're kind of like, hey, this is actually the steps. This is what you're going to do. Hey, here's some people coming in. They're going to tell you exactly how
Yeah.
much it costs, what you need, what it covers, all this stuff. And then maybe, you're just kind of gentle push for a lot of people to go down their own healing journey through these alternative methods, which is a huge component of what I'm trying to spread with this podcast. We talked about mind, body, and mushroom, dude. Like it really does touch all of those things because the mind, body, spirit connection. I think like to be a complete person, all those things have to be connected, working in unison, and you need to be in touch with them. And sometimes psychedelics or holistic alternative modalities in general are a really good way of kind of getting there.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah.
Nick Badis, you're a badass, dude. I'm so stoked that we got to meet, and I'm really looking forward to this event. Can you tell people the website again, just in case anyone listening to this wants to get on there and donate before the end of December?
Sure. I mean, so the website's a little weird. So it's better if they just get on my Instagram or Facebook
Yep.
and look in the link that is
Yep.
on my socials. My Instagram is Battis145. My last name 145. That's the weight I used to fight at, believe it or not.
Oh my god.
So the link's right there. You can check
Cool.
it out to get your tickets right there. And again, it has all of the information for the event. And
Sweet.
if you just want to come, if you don't want to do the seminar, you can just come, show up, support the different vendors that are there, go get a posture check out
Yep.
CPI, and then if you decide, you could pay for your ticket to get taught by a world-class athlete in itself. So check out my website. Um, it's called, I mean, yeah, the website itself is give.classy.org/stem cells and submissions.
Cool.
That's what the event is called, stem cells and submissions. But yeah, you can find it on my socials at Battis145 or on Facebook at Nick Badis.
Sick, man. I'll put links in the show notes and stuff to all this stuff too after,
Awesome.
so you can
Yeah, so
grab
I'll
them.
send those links to you as
That'd be
well so
great.
that they can go in the show notes.
That would be awesome, man. Nick, this has been honestly one of the best conversations I've had on the pod. I've been so stoked. If you were like a brother of another mother from me, so I really resonated with a lot of what you said, and I really hope that our listeners do too, man. So
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jordan. Thanks for facilitating this conversation. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for all your
yeah, man.
support. I really appreciate it, man, and this was a really insightful talk. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man.